Meanwhile, the Global South is increasingly coming together to resist Western pressure. That was the message emerging at the Freedom of Nations Forum held here in Moscow, with officials from more than 50 nations taking part. The Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov took the floor to also condemn what he called the siphoning of resources by the US from Europe.
This is the neo-colonial divide of the world into those who consider themselves exceptional and the rest. Those who are given the role of doing the will of God's chosen ones. Our choice in any situation is to negotiate in order to find a balance between the legitimate interests of the parties, and I emphasize precisely the legitimate interests. If their allies themselves prefer to continue their hopeless attempts to impose their ultimatums in the illusory hope of holding on to the elusive instruments of neo-colonial hegemony, that is their choice. Russia is ready for that too. Neo-colonialism is a dead-end path. Whoever follows it is doomed to eternal conflict. It is enough to look at the relations within the Western camp itself, where some neo-colonializers have already begun to devour others. Amid economic problems, the Americans have already openly started sucking resources out of Europe.
RT's Marina Kozarova was at the forum too and heard firsthand how nations are pressing on with independent policies despite pressure from former colonial powers.
As the name of the forum suggests, gathered here are representatives of countries who feel that the West's neo-colonialist practices are harming their homeland for the West's benefit. We are talking about Africa, Asia, Latin America, Europe. There are literally 400 delegates from over 50 countries, and they are here to figure out mechanisms and strategies to ensure that they no longer have to play by the West's rules. They want to cut their dependence on the West so that they don't have to face punishment by them in case they don't agree.
We have been victims not only of colonialism and imperialism in the past, but neo-colonialism and neo-imperialism are continuing where colonialism and imperialism left. And for us, it is such a pleasure to be here in Moscow because the Russian Federation, in its previous formation as the Soviet Union, played a very important role in the liberation of the African continent.
We are invited by the United Russia Party to participate in this conference, and we believe that the party's initiative is in line with our motto. We believe that the entire global black people have to raise up and redefine its history, heritage and education. So it is in line with the neo-colonialism.
We share a lot of the common objectives of this forum, and I think that this is a very important forum against the backdrop of the international situation, because the world is undergoing profound changes, and we are seeing that the world is far from being a just and fair world. So I think with the rampant new colonization, which can be expressed in the form of, for example, interfering in other countries' internal affairs, building military and political blocs.
The forum started with Dmitry Medvedev taking us back to 1960 when the UN adopted a resolution granting independence to colonial countries and peoples. 89 countries voted in favor of that resolution and 9 countries abstained, and among them, interestingly enough, France, of course, the US, the UK and Australia. Well, since then, the West has continued its damaging practices, whereas Russia has helped post-colonial countries to grow.
I note that our country has done much to break down the foundations of the colonial system and to support national liberation movements. It has provided young independent states with serious assistance in ensuring security, establishing the economy and solving acute social and humanitarian problems. And today, we are ready to unite our efforts in the struggle for true freedom and justice, for progress for all countries and peoples, for the formation of a democratic multipolar world order.
Clearly, the countries represented here feel Russia's support, and they align themselves with Russia's vision of a multipolar world. And a lot has been said as well about BRICS, especially now as we know that the alliance is growing and expanding. And as we know, its share of global GDP has overtaken the share of GDP of the G7. And as we know that more countries are about to join the alliance, this is only going to make that share grow. And again, we know that developing countries, for example, their share in world trade is increasing steadily, whereas the share in world trade of developed economies is diminishing. So this is definitely going to change the dynamics in the world, and this is also something that's been brought up here again. So now they're working on making these mechanisms work so that they completely lose their total dependence on the West.
We wish, as a small country in the region of the Middle East, which is a conflicting and very complex region, to work all together as parties of dignified countries worldwide, hand by hand, to reach a real agreement and do all the process together into fighting this neo-colonialism with all its aspects.
Claim back its political and economic sovereignty. Part of this sovereignty being forged through this forum must be the beneficiation of our minerals in order to drive robust industrialization.
The aim here is to build on that progress and to find ways to ensure that the West can no longer dictate its rules on anyone else, or so that it doesn't have the power to punish any country for not going along with what the West wants, for not playing along with its rules. And also what we're seeing here is a desire of these countries so that the West can never again bring any country to its knees.
We are so much excited with the launch of this forum of parties to fight against neocolonialism. We need to look for new organizations like this one so that we can establish our own tools that can then make us more free nations.
Any country that wants to move forward must be free and independent, and that is why there is a huge interest in this great conference today. I must say that it comes at just the right time, when there is tremendous pressure on many countries, when you can really see the daily fueling of neocolonialism.